Hey guys, welcome to another video from NZPocketGuide.com. Today we're going to be listing the worst travel advice we've ever received, and we'll tailor our answer to them toward New Zealand because that's mainly the country that we cover on NZPocketGuide.com. So let's get started. Alright, so the first worst travel advice we've ever received is women shouldn't... Laura, you take this one.
Yeah, so the first worst travel advice we've ever heard for New Zealand is that women should never travel alone. That's just ridiculous. I mean, I've met so many people, so many females traveling by themselves and having a hell of a time. I came to New Zealand by myself and I too had a hell of a time. So yeah, this sort of, I don't know, yeah, it's just weird. No, of course females can travel alone. There's never been a situation where I felt unsafe being by myself. But also, of course, you always have to have some common sense and not go down any dodgy alleys at night by yourself or anything like that. But I mean, who does that anyway? So, yeah, it's perfectly safe to travel alone in New Zealand if you are a solo female traveler.
Our next terrible travel advice, probably given by a couch potato that never left their home, is that you shouldn't stay in a hostel, it's not safe. That is absolute baloney. Hostels are very safe, especially in New Zealand, and if you're very worried about some of your belongings, there is even usually safes or lockers which are available for you to use, and I've never had any issue, I never lost anything in any hostel that I've ever stayed on. Did you ever?
No, absolutely not. No.
Alright, so baloney. Number 3.
Okay, number 3 is when someone says to you, one of your friends says to you, wait one more year and I'll come with you.
Classic.
Yeah, so trying to, wait until you can travel and wait for people like, your friends to come with you and try and make your life work into their life is... it's kind of a mess, and you might just end up never doing it because things don't work out and a lot can change in a year, for instance. So I say when you're ready to travel, don't be afraid to take the plunge, even if you are going by yourself. Solo travel's really awesome. So yeah, don't listen to that friend.
We were both solo travelers when we arrived in New Zealand.
Yeah.
We had a blast.
Yeah.
All right, the next baloney travel advice that terrible travel advice we've received basically is don't worry, you can pass through customs and immigration without meeting the requirements of your visas. So a lot of people, and that's more about the working holiday visa or also the biosecurity in New Zealand. So if you come into New Zealand on a working holiday visa, there's going to be a lot of conditions attached to your visa. You need to have a certain amount of funds, you need to have enough funds for your return tickets, just those kind of things. Same thing if you're on a student visas or any of those kind of things. Well, yes, that's true. They're not checking everybody at immigration. That would be a daunting, massive task that they just don't have the power to undertake. However, they do spot checks quite a lot of people, and we have heard many stories of people that message us afterwards and say, my friend told me I could come and it's fine if I didn't have the money or any of that. They got turned away at arrival. So that really sucks. The next part is biosecurity. Don't try to sneak in anything into New Zealand. Don't think that, oh yeah, I can sneak in those dates that my family and friends are really gonna like. You can't bring that due to the biosecurity rules, and we do have more information on that on nzpocketguide.com. So check it out and make sure that you just abide by the rules. It's so much easier rather than having to pay a fine. Now, just in case if you are unsure and you packed something, just declare it. You're much better off declaring something that you cannot take into New Zealand. Let's say dates. You brought a lot of dates, nice, dried, they're delicious, they're so yummy, and you don't know when arrive at biosecurity if you can bring them. The answer is you can't, but you don't know. Just declare them, and if custom deems that you are not able to bring them into the country, they will just dispose of them for you and you won't be paying a fine. However, if you did not declare them, you will have to pay a hefty fine. Don't do that. Don't think that you can sneak anything through customs or immigration. Next up
is the next worst travel advice we've heard is plan everything. I mean, coming from a couple that like to write travel guides and like a lot of planning, it might sound a bit weird for us to say don't plan everything, But yeah, when you're coming to New Zealand, there's a lot of things that you'll find when you're traveling around that are quite spontaneous. You'll come across a hike, or you'll see some beautiful scenery here or there, or you'll hear about a really awesome activity only once you get to New Zealand. So you need to sort of give yourself some time in your itinerary to actually be able to do something spontaneous and go and do those awesome things that you just get to see as you're traveling in New Zealand. Of course, it's always good to plan some things, but actually that's going on to our next worst travel advice. So maybe, Robert, you should take that away.
Yeah, so the other worst travel advice is plan nothing. You still have to plan a few things when traveling. So although a lot of people like to travel willy-nilly and they like to just land in the country and just work things out, it's a perfectly valid way to do things. It will make your life way easier if you have a few things planned anyway. So if you're coming to New Zealand, for instance, on a working holiday visa, make sure that you have your first week sorted out at least, so you know what you're going to be doing on your first week. We do have actually an article on nzpocketguide.com helping you out with, planning the first week of your working holiday visa in New Zealand. Or if you're a student, we have planning your first week of being a student in New Zealand. Just those kind of things, just to make sure that you do have a plan and you don't start losing time, money, and just hope into sorting everything like that. Now, if you're a tourist, coming to New Zealand and traveling all around, at the moment when we're recording this video, there is still a lot of border restrictions, so you can get away with literally coming to New Zealand, planning nothing, booking nothing, and just having a blast around the country. But most times you will have to actually book your accommodation, book your activities, and make sure that you have a few things planned around. However, keep some flexibility in your itinerary for weather and extra activities you want to do.
Absolutely. So next worst travel advice is traveling is not safe. Here's the pepper spray. So yeah, I mean, traveling is safe. I mean, thousands, no, millions of people do it all the time. So yeah, of course, when you leave your house, there may be a risk of something happening, but your house might set on fire if you stay at home anyway. So yeah, I mean, traveling is, there's obviously precautions you can take and sort of things to make it safer. Use some common sense. Don't walk around with flashing your cash and begging someone to mug you or anything,
Or come to New Zealand because it's one of the safest countries in the world anyways. That's already a pretty good precaution. Choose New Zealand as a country.
The crime rates in New Zealand are lower than a lot of other countries. Robin and I grew up in Europe, and there's definitely, we even just see crime happening in front of our face back in Europe. Well, I have. Anyway, people pickpocketing and stuff. So I've just not experienced any of that being in New Zealand. So yeah, I definitely consider New Zealand a safe place to travel.
Okay, moving on to next worst travel advice is use traveler's check. I remember the first few times I traveled around, people were talking about traveler's check and they were telling me to use traveler's check because it's a safer way to handle money. It's absolute nonsense. Traveler's checks are very, very hard to redeem. They're not an easy way to carry cash whatsoever. They're not an easy way to pay with whatsoever. There's so many other ways that you can do to actually travel around New Zealand and deal with money. And literally carrying a massive bundle of cash would be actually way easier than actually carrying traveler's check. It's baloney. Yet again. Here you go.
Your favorite word.
Yes, favorite word of the day. Number 9.
All right, so another bad travel advice is to bring an outfit for every single season. Now that would be a pretty big suitcase if you did that. This kind of, well, first of all, if you're just coming to New Zealand for a short time, instead of bringing an outfit for every single season, because yes, New Zealand does tend to have 4 seasons in one day, it's better to bring sort of versatile outfits and, layers. So if you have you have your underlayers, your t-shirt, and then you can have some, well, actually what we're wearing right now, sort of merino wool long sleeve layers for when it's a little bit chillier, and then a top layer like a coat, which we actually have our coats in our bags. So we're actually hiking right now with all the layers we need for basically all the seasons right now. So yeah, we've managed to pack that in some backpacks. So yeah, that's kind of the better way to approach it. But even if you're coming to New Zealand, say on a working holiday visa, and you're going to be here for an entire year, then it's best to actually just come with basically some basic travel sort of versatile clothing. But if you do need to get anything else, then there are shops in New Zealand. You can definitely get what you need here. It's not a third world country. So yeah.
All right, next terrible travel advice is buying a paper guide. Now, a paper guide is, somewhat useful because you can access it not online. However, it's quite easy to get internet when on the road in New Zealand. And in exchange, you get your travel guide always updated. NZPocketGuide.com is New Zealand's largest travel guide, always up to date, completely free of charge for you to use. So you don't need to spend $50 on buying a travel guide that you won't be able to use too much because you realize that a lot of the information are out of date. Obviously, we're a little bit biased on that. Whew, that's a uphill.
Yeah.
Anyway, obviously, we're a little bit biased on that, but we do put our heart and soul into NZPocketGuide.com. So check it out and you'll save yourself $50 that you can spend on an epic adventure around the country.
And finally,
Yes.
our final worst travel advice is, don't worry, you won't need insurance. So yeah, travel insurance, that's always the sort of thing where you're like, do I have to? But first of all, if you're coming to New Zealand on different types of visas, for example, like the working holiday visa, it's actually mandatory. One of the conditions of your visa is to have travel insurance. So it is good to look into that because otherwise you'll be coming into the country illegally. But otherwise, if you're coming for visiting, then it's also good to just have that extra backup. For instance, when you're traveling to New Zealand from, say, Europe or anywhere else.
North America, Asia,
America,
Africa, they're all the continents.
Yeah. You usually have to take one or more flights to get to New Zealand. And then there is also that sort of risk of, missing flights, that sort of thing. It's a little bit more of a bigger journey than your normal sort of just hopping across the channel or whatever, going to the neighboring country or whatever. It's a bit more of a ordeal where there could be a couple of sort of logistics that go wrong. So it's always good to just have that extra backup of insurance just for peace of mind and if you need it. So we do have a whole article on nzpocketguide.com on how to get insurance, what good sort of cheap, affordable insurance there is for New Zealand. So go check that out.
Laura is about to run out of breath right here, guys. All right, so if you received any of those travel advice, don't follow them, ignore them, and get on with your travel planning. If you do want some followable, is that a word? If you want some followable travel advice for New Zealand, check out our channel. It's nzpocketguide.com. And yeah, there's heaps of...
Whose idea was to hike and talk?
There's heaps of travel tips in there, plenty of itinerary ideas and everything like that. You can also check out the website, nzpocketguide.com, and you can hit like to reward our hard work.
This really is hard work,
You
guys.
can also subscribe if you want to. Okay,
I feel
bye-bye.
like we put this on ourselves.
Yes. Bye-bye, guys. Thank you for watching.